Hey dudes, medieval winters were no joke. No heating, no thick blankets, just freezing nights, muddy floors, and smoke from a dying fire. Peasants didn't stay cozy, they just fought to survive. They burned anything they could, slept beside livestock, stuffed straw in their clothes just to stop the wind from cutting through. Tonight, we're going back to that world. No kings, no glory, just people, cold to the bone, doing what they had to do. If weird, honest history helps you chill out and sleep, hit like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what time is it for you right now, and how cold is it where you are? Now dim the lights. Get under something warm. And let's drift into a time where surviving winter was the biggest win of all. As you draw your blanket up and settle in for the night, imagine the air around you thick with the quiet tension of a waning. Autumn in 14th century England. The leaves are mostly gone now, and the trees stand bare like crooked skeletons watching over the plough-scarred fields. The wheat has been cut weeks ago, threshed in long communal barns under thatched roofs, and winnowed by hand or rudimentary tools. But something's gone wrong this year. Not enough sun, too much rain, maybe both. The yield was poor. In a village of just 50 or 60 souls, every sheaf of wheat matters. And when there's not enough, there are choices to be made. Not noble or political choices, but survival choices. Who eats bread in January? Who eats barley in March? And who doesn't eat much of anything at all? Your day, if you were there, would begin before dawn and end long after sunset. A peasant's winter did not offer rest. Instead, it pressed on the ribs of the hungry, in the creaking joints of the aged, in the frost forming in unglazed windows. The manor lord, distant in both wealth and warmth, has already taken his portion of the harvest, regardless of its size. Tithes to the church have also been paid, as always, in grain, eggs, and wool. There's no such thing as tax relief in feudal England. With only 2 oxen in the village, owned by the reeve, but hired out to others, ploughing was slow. This past spring, your allotted strips in the open field system weren't fertilized with enough dung. The result, your wheat came up patchy, thin and pale. The grain rattled too easily in the wind, not full and golden, but light and stunted. Most villagers will have to eat their seed stock to survive this winter. That means gambling away the future spring's planting for a meager present. You might think of winter as cold, but for a medieval peasant, winter is hunger. The village itself is arranged haphazardly, a clustering of crofts and tofts, small plots and attached homes made of wattle and daub. Smoke seeps from low chimneys into a grey sky. Inside, your home is a single-room dwelling, shared with family and often chickens or a pig. The thatch above drips occasionally. Damp is a permanent resident. Bedding is straw, if you're lucky, covered in rough woolen cloth. Your clothes are made of the same, layer upon layer, rarely washed, and more valuable than most other possessions. Water, fetched from the village well or stream, freezes in buckets if left too long. And firewood, a scarce commodity. You're technically not allowed to collect it from the forest without the Lord's permission. Green wood smokes and barely warms, but it's what you have. Meals are simple. A pottage, thick stew made of beans, turnips, leeks, and whatever dried herbs you could gather before the frost. If you had a good year, perhaps there's salt pork or smoked fish, but this year wasn't good. So you stretch what you have, adding more water, more barley, more hope. Daily life in December is structured not by plans but by necessity. Repairing tools, spinning wool, boiling linen, making candles from tallow you saved. And if you're one of the village women, you're also watching for signs of pregnancy or illness, both of which can be deadly. Childbirth doesn't stop for cold. Evening. Prayers are whispered in Latin, half understood, the words more ritual than belief. The church stands at the village centre, its stones slightly warmer than the fields but never truly comfortable. The priest has a small fire and usually a better diet. He reads aloud from manuscripts few can interpret, a constant reminder that divine help may be as distant as royal help. At night, animals are brought inside for warmth. The pig might root through straw under your sleeping bench. A goose might be tied near the hearth, hissing softly. Children curl together like kittens under one shared blanket, while adults speak in low voices about the stores left. Each tally of oats and onions is a measure of time. Will it last until February? What if the snow comes early? It's easy to imagine these lives as tragic, but for the people living them, they are ordinary. You wouldn't have known anything else. This was survival, repeated year after year, a quiet defiance of death through routine, through habit, and through a deep communal resilience. The seasons didn't forgive, but neither did they surprise. Winter, like the Lord, always returned. And so, on this particularly poor winter, after a bad harvest, a sick ox, and rumours of a nearby manor falling to famine, you lay down, not to rest, but to wait. For snow, for news, for a better spring, or at least not a worse one. But before you drift off in the straw-scented dark, a thought nags at you. What happens if next year's harvest is worse? What if there is no seed to plant at all? You wake before dawn again. The air inside your one-room cottage is thick with the bite of frost. Your breath clouds in front of your face, even though the hearth is still smouldering. The fire was banked carefully last night, hidden under a layer of ash to preserve the embers. Lighting a fire from scratch is not something done casually, not when firewood is rationed, not when the forest is watched, and not when flint and steel are hard to come by. The hearth is not just warmth, it is life. Around it, food is cooked, stories are shared, linen is boiled, and in the darkest months, spirits are held together. A child may even be born by its light. But this morning, there is no real warmth. Just the slow hiss of damp logs and the scent of stale broth from the previous night. You step outside to fetch water from the communal well, your leather boots stiff and cracked. The ground crunches beneath your feet, hard with frost. The sky is grey, not yet ready to give up the sun. The fields, now barren, are still visible through the low mist. They wait, as you do, for spring, but there is little optimism this time. This is what hunger does in winter. It teaches patience, and it makes every task feel longer than it should. The last of the carrots have gone soft. The onions are starting to sprout in storage, and the dried beans, your fallback, are running low. You've begun mixing more barley husks into your bread. It makes it heavier and less pleasant to chew, but it fills the stomach for a few hours longer. You aren't starving, not yet, but the signs are there. Children complain of aching bellies more often. Elders doze longer, their bodies slower to move and quicker to chill. Even the animals seem subdued. The village pig hasn't squealed for food today, and that's unusual. You recall the stories the old shepherd once told about the Great Famine, not 20 years ago, when entire families vanished over a single winter. Some had taken to boiling bark from trees. Others had eaten leather boots. There were rumours, too, of darker things, of graves robbed for marrow. You don't want to believe them, but those who survived remember. At midday, there's a communal, a gathering. A small fire is lit outside the Reeves house, and the villagers gather in a crescent shape, wrapped in furs and rough-spun cloaks. There's little to celebrate. It's not a feast day, it's a reckoning. The village reeve, appointed by the Lord, but himself a peasant, stands with his cap in hand. He's thin, pale, and he speaks with effort. He explains what many already suspect. The grain stores are lower than expected. Mice have found their way into the bins. A few sacks are spoiled. More will need to be shared or sacrificed. The decision is made. Rationing will begin tomorrow. Bread will be halved. Lentils stretched. No one protests, because no one has a better idea. Some whisper of travelling to another manor, or sending someone to the town for extra supplies. But there's no coin to spend, and even if there were, it's a half-day's journey by foot. Dangerous in winter, dangerous even in the best of times. There's talk, too, of brewing pine needles into tea for strength, or drying nettles to mix into stews. These are old tricks passed down from mother to daughter, but they are the tools of desperation, not solutions. As the meeting ends, the priest lingers to speak with several families. His Latin is solemn, his blessings soft. He offers prayer and asks for donations, what little the church can collect. Some offer a boiled egg, others a promise. He accepts both. By evening, you return to your cottage with fewer answers and more fears. Inside, the hearth glows dimly again. You ladle out a thin pottage from a blackened iron pot. Barley, onion, a handful of cabbage, and the last sliver of salted meat from a week ago. It tastes of smoke and fatigue. After the children are put to bed, you sit in silence with your thoughts. Across the room, your spouse is darning a sock in the fading light. There's little to say. Words take effort, and you've said them all before. You talk instead of next season's planting, if there is any seed to plant. Maybe the monks at the abbey to the south will share theirs. Maybe not. The future, in this moment, is a closed door. You glance toward the ceiling, toward the bundled herbs and onions hanging in the beams. You count the roots in the bin. You remember how many spoons of flour are left. You begin to do the math in your head, the kind only a hungry person understands. How long will this last? How many days until the next meal is just water? There is, despite all of this, a strange kind of order in the chaos, a routine of survival, a rhythm of want and waiting. You understand now what your grandparents meant when they said that winter is not a season. It is a test of patience, of planning, of silent strength. But even as the fire flickers and you rest your head on a straw-stuffed pillow, you can't shake one question. If next year fails too, what happens to those who no longer have anything left to give? The days grow longer now, almost imperceptibly. The midday sun, when it shows, feels less cruel than in January. The icicles dripping from thatched eaves lengthen before they melt, and the wind, though still sharp, carries less malice. But winter in a 14th century English village doesn't end with the calendar. It ends when the food runs out, or doesn't. This year, it nearly did. Your bread is down to a crust today. You haven't seen fresh meat in over 6 weeks. The last pig was slaughtered in early February and divided among the 5 largest households. The fat rendered, the organs boiled, nothing wasted. The bones simmered so long that even the dogs refused to gnaw them. Salted fish has been a rare gift, traded from a passing tinker in exchange for worn wool. Most of your meals are hot water, thickened with barley husks and whatever leaves remain from last autumn's gleaning. Children no longer play in the lane. Their energy is reserved for chores and sleep. One of the older boys, Tom, has begun to swell, not from overeating, but from starvation. You've seen it before. The limbs thin, but the belly grows. His mother says it's just winter fatigue. You say nothing. Even the church has grown quieter. Fewer parishioners attend the morning prayers, and those who do sit hunched in the cold, their breath curling around murmured Latin. The priest no longer asks for offerings. He knows. Instead, he has taken to reading the book of Job more often. Perhaps he believes suffering has a shape. You are not so sure. The Reeve made another accounting of the grain bins last week. It confirmed what you suspected. Nothing remains. The seeds for spring planting have been preserved, barely, locked in the manor's granary and guarded by the steward's men. No one dares steal them. The punishment is clear: death. Not because of law, but because if the seed goes, so does the village. And yet, amid all this scarcity, something strange happens. The village becomes quieter, yes, but also closer. There is more sharing. A widow with a half-filled pot shares it with her neighbour. A boy carves a toy from a fallen branch for a sick child. An old man sings low songs from his youth, just loud, enough for others to hear through the walls. And when a girl dies, only 6 years old, likely from fever and hunger, everyone turns out for the burial. The priest's hands tremble in the cold, but his voice doesn't. He speaks not of God's will, but of the girl's laughter last summer, when she danced barefoot in the hay. Life in a medieval winter is brutal, but it is not without humanity. By late March, there are signs, true signs, of change. Snowdrops bloom along the churchyard path. The hens begin laying again, though their eggs are small and infrequent, and the earth, when prodded, no longer resists entirely. Mud, not frost, clings to your boots. Preparations for planting begin the same way they always have, with hope and muscle. The oxen, underfed but alive, are yoked and pushed into the fields. The men walk behind them with wooden ploughs, the women, behind them scattering dung and broken straw for fertilizer. Children are tasked with keeping birds away. Every strip of land is turned, slowly, methodically. The rhythm of it echoes the rhythm of your breath. Forward, pause, turn, plant, forward again. This spring is not full of joy. There is no celebration, only cautious optimism. You know better than to expect abundance, but you expect something, and that is enough. The priest declares a day of fasting, not because there is food to spare, but because he says it pleases the heavens. Most villagers comply, because frankly, it makes no difference. On the first truly warm day, you walk to the stream outside the village. The water runs clearer than you remember. You wash your hands in it and let them linger. The cold no longer stings. You realize you survived, you and your family. Not all did, but enough. By May there will be greens to gather. By June, perhaps strawberries. By August, if God wills it, wheat again. The same cycle, the same risks, but this time, maybe not so cruel. You return home to your cottage, still patched with straw, still damp in the corners, but it feels different. Not warmer, exactly, just less final. You hang your boots by the fire and sit down to stitch a worn cloak. Outside, your youngest hums while digging in the soft soil. Winter didn't win this time, but it never really loses either. It waits, and as you sow in the dim light, you ask yourself the question that has no answer. How many more winters can one village endure before the earth, or the Lord or fate decides otherwise? You wake to the groan of timber and the crackle of frost. It's still dark out, because in a Massachusetts January in the early 1800s, dawn is slow to rise and hesitant. To bring warmth, you sit up in a narrow cot in a bunkhouse that smells of pine, damp wool, and last night's tobacco. The other men, your co-workers, are stirring too. One coughs, another spits into a tin mug. No one speaks much at first. It's too cold for chatter. And besides, everyone knows what today is. It's cutting day. Outside, Great Pond, like dozens of other lakes in the region, is locked in ice. And not just a surface crust, but thick, dense ice. Perfect for harvesting. You don't think of it as beautiful, though it glitters in the low morning light. You think of it as money. Ice is your livelihood. A strange one, maybe. One your father didn't have. But here, in early 19th century New England, ice has become a booming industry. This all began not many winters ago in 1806, when a Bostonian merchant named Frederick Tudor took a wild idea and turned it into an empire. He believed, somewhat madly at the time, that people in the West Indies, and even as far away as India, would pay handsomely for blocks of frozen lake water, cut in winter and shipped across the ocean. They laughed at him, of course. The papers called him the Ice King of Fools. But he persisted. He experimented with sawdust insulation, with ship hulls, with timing, and he made it work. Ice, clean, American, New England lake ice, was suddenly valuable. More valuable than the men cutting it could ever afford. And that's where you come in. Your job is simple in theory. With a heavy iron-toothed saw, you and your team cut the surface of the lake into a vast checkerboard. Horses drag sleds of tools across the snow-covered ice. Men like you chip at the edges with chisels and saws, breaking the frozen sheet into blocks, each about 2 feet by 2 and a foot thick. Each block weighs more than 200 pounds. You move them with tongs and leverage and calloused hands. The ice is slick. The air burns your lungs and your fingers never truly thaw, but it pays. Not well, but predictably. And in the off-season, there's not much else to do. Today's ice is perfect, cold, clean, and unclouded. Frederick Tudor himself once said that clear ice was a mark of Yankee virtue. You don't know about that, but you know that clear ice fetches a better price. Along the shore, the ice house waits, an enormous wooden barn of sawdust-lined walls and shadowy corridors. Inside, ice is packed block by block, separated by straw or shavings, stacked high to the rafters. In summer, it will be opened, loaded onto carts or ships, and sent south or overseas. It will melt a little, of course, but not much. Not with the insulation tricks learned over years of quiet, chilly obsession. This industry, odd as it sounds, has grown faster than anyone expected. By the 1830s, New England ice will be in Havana bars, Charleston pantries, even Calcutta kitchens. In cities like Boston and New York, ice boxes, an early kind of refrigerator, are beginning to appear in wealthier homes. Ice becomes a status symbol. Cold butter in July, chilled oysters, iced lemonade for summer guests. It seems like a small luxury, but small luxuries fuel entire economies. For men like you, though, ice is mostly just work. Your face is chapped from the wind. Your boots are lined with rags instead of fur. Your meals are basic. Beans, salted pork, hard bread, coffee if you're lucky. Sometimes someone brings molasses, and that feels like a gift. Your fingers are often cracked. Your back aches. But the rhythm of the work is its own kind of warmth. There's something comforting in the scrape of the saw, the creak of the sled, the call of clear before a block is heaved to shore. You don't talk much while working, but you share everything else. Flasks, gloves, smokes, and in the evening, you all crowd back into the bunkhouse, sore and half frozen, but alive. There are accidents, of course. Men fall into the freezing lake. Some survive, pulled out quickly, others don't. The current beneath the ice can be unpredictable. You learned early to respect the water. Sometimes, too, the ice shifts as you cut. A crack races underfoot, faster than you can react. You jump, you listen, you pray it's not structural. If the sheet collapses, the day's work, and maybe more, is ruined. Still, the demand for ice grows. More companies open ice houses. More lakes are marked for cutting. Some environmentalists, though they wouldn't have used that word, start to worry. Will the lakes suffer? Will people regret taming nature in this way? But most just see opportunity. Ice, ironically, is hot. And here you are, balanced on a frozen lake, saw in hand, wondering not about the markets of Havana or the cocktails of Calcutta, but whether your boots will hold out another week, whether you'll get paid on time, whether this year's ice will be good enough to keep you working till March. You lean into the saw again, arms burning, breath fogging. The block shifts beneath your feet, and you feel the cold of the water just inches away, waiting. You pause, not out of fear, but from thought. How did something as ordinary as frozen water become a global trade? And how long can it last before the world finds a way to make cold without winter? As winter turns slowly to spring, the work shifts, but it doesn't stop. By March, the lake ice is thinner, less reliable. The days stretch longer, the sun lingering like an unwanted guest, softening the firm grip of the season. Cutting is riskier now. Each step on the lake requires calculation. The saw still bites, the sleds still groan, but every worker knows the end is near, for now. In the ice house, however, a different kind of activity begins. Men no longer just harvest, they pack, they measure, they prepare for shipment. This is the second life of the ice trade, the part most people don't see. The quiet choreography of moving frozen blocks from a sleepy Massachusetts pond to the sultry wharves of the Caribbean, or even beyond. The process is laborious and precise. Ice, once cut, must be stored with care. The barns, massive wooden structures, near the water, are built with thick walls and deep shaded interiors. Sawdust, gathered in the warmer months and kept dry, is the secret ingredient. It's shoveled between layers of ice like sugar in a preserving jar, acting as insulation. Without it, the ice would melt within weeks. With it, the blocks can last months. Frederick Tudor, the man who envisioned this improbable industry, wasn't the first to think of shipping ice, but he was the first to succeed at it on a grand scale. After years of failure and debt, he mastered the methods. Which ships to use, which ports had the right storage, and, perhaps most crucially, how to persuade tropical customers that they wanted ice in the first place. That persuasion was its own kind of genius. In Havana, he gave free samples to taverns and charged only for the second delivery, once patrons had tasted truly chilled drinks. In Charleston, he paid for demonstrations of meat preservation, and in New Orleans, where summer heat wilted everything from butter to breath, he promoted ice as a mark of civility, a sign that one had arrived. It worked. By the 1830s, Tudor's ice was being exported in hundreds of tons per year. He had contracts in Jamaica, Cuba, and even in India, where ships bearing Massachusetts lake ice would dock after 4 months at sea, still holding usable cold blocks deep in their holds. It seemed impossible, but the sawdust worked, and the market boomed. You, As one of the workers, rarely see these foreign shores. But you hear stories from the men who load the ships at Boston Harbor. They speak of thick-sailed schooners bound for St. Thomas or Port-au-Prince, of passengers marveling at cold lemonade in the tropics, of the shock on a Calcutta dockworker's face when a block of ice slides down a ramp into an insulated cellar. Back in your village, word spreads that the ice trade is making people rich, but it isn't you. Your pay is modest and the hours are long. But there's a certain pride in knowing that something you helped harvest is being used in the homes of people you'll never meet. The blocks you helped saw and haul will cool a banker's drink in Jamaica, or keep milk fresh in a plantation kitchen in the Carolinas. And there's talk, always, of innovation. Some say engineers are working on machines that can make ice without winter, without lakes even. Artificial cold, they call it. You don't quite understand how. It sounds like alchemy or madness, but some men believe it. They say New York has men with ice-making machines already, small and inefficient, but growing. Still, for now, ice is cut by hand, by muscle, and by cold. There's another change too, social, if subtle. With more ice available in American cities, everyday life begins to shift. In Boston, milk can last longer in summer. Doctors use ice to lower fevers and preserve bodies. Fishmongers display their catch on beds of frozen shards. And in homes of the middle class, the icebox becomes a fixture, making it possible to store meat, butter, and even leftovers for days, not hours. This cold convenience changes how people eat, cook, and think about food. It makes summer feel less hostile. It makes cities feel more manageable. It makes survival in sweltering climates just a little easier. Yet, for all its usefulness, the work behind the scenes, your work, remains hard, seasonal, and uncelebrated. You and your fellow cutters are not industrialists. You are laborers. And while the world applauds the Yankee ingenuity of the ice trade, few recognize the men who fall through the ice, who lose fingers to frostbite, who haul 200-pound blocks uphill in sleet and silence. There's little romance in the ice house, but there is endurance. You pack the final load of the season with practiced hands. The blocks slide into place, each a little miracle of geometry and grit. You toss another layer of sawdust over them, patting it down like flour on a pie. You seal the wooden doors tight. You nod to the foreman and walk out into the grey spring light. There's mud now where snow once lay, and in your bones a kind of satisfaction, not warm exactly, but solid. You know the ice is leaving, but part of you wonders, when ice can be made in a machine, what becomes of the men who once carved winter from the land? By the 1850s, the world knows New England not just for its shipyards or textiles, but for its ice. The numbers are staggering. Tens of thousands of tons of frozen lake water are shipped every year. From Maine to Florida, from Boston to Bombay, even to Brazil and Australia. All cut in winter, stored in sawdust, and transported by steamship and sail across thousands of miles. It is, without irony, one of the coldest industries with the hottest global reach. And yet, just as the ice trade reaches its peak, a shadow begins to form, not from weather, but from invention. The machines arrive quietly at first, in small laboratories, in the notebooks of tinkerers and engineers who look at the labor of cutting, storing, and shipping ice and wonder, what if we didn't need winter at all? The first artificial ice machines are inefficient and dangerous. They use ammonia, ether, and complex pressure systems. Most explode, leak, or fail to cool anything at all, but a few work just well enough. By the 1860s, there are successful ice factories in the American South and parts of Europe, especially in places too warm to rely on natural harvests. To you, back in New England, these stories seem remote, artificial cold. You've seen the lake freeze, felt the sting of snow under your nails. Ice isn't made, it's earned. Still, fewer orders come in this year, and next year, fewer still. The freighters from Boston sail less often with ice in their bellies. Wharves that once bustled with ice blocks and shouting porters now sit quiet. Some ice houses close. Others sell to beer brewers who still use ice to cool their fermentation vats. But even that industry is changing. You keep working though. There are still orders, even if smaller. Local demand persists. Hotels, fishmongers, restaurants, families with new iceboxes. You still wake before dawn in winter, saw in hand, moving across a frozen lake. But something feels different. You no longer cut ice with ambition. You cut it with memory. Then, one summer in the 1870s, you hear that New Orleans has fully converted to machine ice. A factory produces it daily, year-round. It's cheaper than shipping frozen lake blocks from the north, cleaner even, predictable. Frederick Tudor, long praised as the Ice King, has already passed on. His empire lives on briefly, run by others, but even that wanes. Machines can do in hours what took you weeks. Without frostbite, without danger, without the mercy of the weather. Soon, railroads are used less for hauling frozen goods and more for shipping mechanical freezers. Cities stop building massive ice houses. Engineers build better refrigerating units. What was once a seasonal, weather-dependent miracle becomes a reliable, manufactured product. In a matter of decades, the global ice trade vanishes. You don't know when it happens exactly, only that the work offers fewer days each year. The lake still freezes. The saws still hang in the barn. But no one comes asking. The young men now move to factories or mills. They talk of steam engines, not sleds. You see fewer boot prints on the lake in January. Some seasons, no one cuts at all. One year, you walk to the lake just after a snow. The surface is silent, untouched. The ice thick, perfect, but useless. No teams, no shouts, no creak of sleds. You sit at the edge of the shore and listen. The wind, cold and sharp, moves through the bare trees. The water beneath the ice is still the industry that brought ice to the tropics, that reshaped how the world ate, drank, and survived summer, ended not with a crash, but with a whisper, not with fire, but with cold silence. Later, historians will call it a triumph of technology. They will marvel at how a block of ice from a pond in Maine once chilled a mango in Madras. They'll write books about the ambition, the ingenuity, and the legacy of Frederick Tudor and his frozen empire. But they will rarely mention the men who walked out on the lake each winter, who carved perfect squares from frozen water with aching hands, who loaded ships in sleet, who slept in bunkhouses and risked drowning beneath cracking sheets, who gave the world cold before the world knew it wanted it. You are one of those men, and, as you walk home from the frozen lake for the last time, you ask yourself one final question. When the world no longer remembers the hand that shaped its comfort, was it ever really yours to begin with? In the jagged shadow of the Alps, under a slate-grey sky bruised with snow, a small village gathers for its final market day of the year. It is late October, and the wind no longer whispers. It bites. You are standing at the edge of the square, wrapped in layers of wool and homespun linen, watching as the stalls are dismantled one by one. This isn't a festival. There's no music, no laughter. It is a day of calculation. For a Highland peasant in 17th century Switzerland, or Austria or Savoy or any Alpine territory, this day marks the end of fresh trade until spring. With the passes soon to be blocked by snowfall, and the high roads. Narrowed by drifts, everything your village will eat for the next 5 or 6 months must be stored, or it will not exist. Winter isn't just a season here. It's a wall, a test of foresight, and food, real food, is currency. On this day, the last pigs are sold, not live pigs, but halves, slaughtered and brined and wrapped in rough linen. The cheese wheels, aged through the summer, are weighed and bartered. A trader from the valley brings sacks of salt, harvested far away and worth nearly their weight in meat. In return, he takes smoked trout from the river and dried mushrooms. From the forest, salt, sweat, snow, these are your tools. There is no refrigeration, no cellar cool enough once the snow buries your roof. Instead, your people have learned to use the weather itself, to lean into winter rather than hide from it. And it all begins now. You return home from market with a small sack of rye flour, 3 cured sausages, a wheel of hard goat cheese, and 2 precious lumps of rock salt. You've traded away a basket of dried herbs and most of your apples to get them. You hope it was the right choice. Your home is small and dark, built from stone and timber. The roof is steep to shed snow, and the loft above the hearth is lined with bundles, thyme, lavender, garlic and nettles, hung to dry in the warm air rising from the fire below. You live with your brother's family and their goats. Space is not comfort, it is necessity. The first task is to salt the meat. You haul the last cuts from the curing trough, a rough wooden box in the cold shed beside the house. Inside, thick slabs of pork rest in a layer of coarse salt, packed like stone into every crevice. The salt draws out the blood and moisture, preserving the meat by desiccation. It will be another week before it's ready for smoking, but the brining must be refreshed. You remove each slab with care, inspecting it for mold or spoilage. If the weather had turned warm last week, the entire batch might be lost, but it didn't. You are lucky, for now. Once salted, the meat will be hung in the chimney above your hearth, not too close to the fire, just near enough that the smoke curls up around it daily, kissing it with warmth and protection. Over weeks, the flesh will harden, darken, shrink. A thick rind will form, and by January, it will be edible. If not appetizing, nothing is wasted. The skin will be boiled to make broth, the fat rendered for candles, the blood, if fresh, mixed with oats to form thick cakes. Even the bones once used for soup will be ground and mixed with lye to make soap. The cheese, too, must be stored, wisely. It was made in August, up in the high meadows where the goats fed on mountain herbs. The milk was thick and fragrant, the curds pressed by hand into linen-lined wheels. Now, months later, those wheels have matured into rock-hard discs that can last until spring. If kept dry, if protected from rats, each wheel is brushed with brine and stored on wooden shelves near the rafters. Every few weeks it must be turned, inspected for cracks, rebrined if needed. One spoiled wheel can rot the others. One careless hand can ruin months of effort. The vegetables are another matter. There is no fresh produce after October. You store your root vegetables in crates layered with sand in the root cellar. Carrots, turnips, parsnips. The cabbage is shredded and packed into barrels with salt to ferment into sauerkraut. If sealed properly, it will last. If not, it will stink before December. Garlic is braided and hung. Beans are dried and shelled. Peas, too. Nothing is eaten fresh. Everything is transformed. Bread, made now with coarsely ground rye, is baked once a week in massive loaves, dense, dark, hard enough to blunt a knife. These loaves are stored on a shelf and softened by soup or broth as needed. Fresh bread is for the wealthy. The rest make do with what they've planned. It is a way of life dictated by memory. You remember the year the snow came early and the meat hadn't cured, or the year the salt was impure and the brine turned black. These are not stories. They are warnings. Every task is done slowly, carefully, because the consequences of failure are weeks away. You cannot fix mistakes in January. You can only starve more slowly. As night falls, the wind thickens with flurries, and you add more wood to the fire. The goats shift in the lower part of the house, their warmth rising through the floorboards. A pot of lentils simmers on the hearth, flavoured with a scrap of smoked meat and a single bay leaf. It is a meagre meal, but it is planned. It is part of a long, careful map through a long, unforgiving season. You eat slowly, counting the sausages still hanging, thinking of the mushrooms in the loft, remembering the salt, measured to the ounce, in the storeroom. And before sleep, you ask yourself, just as your mother did before you, have I done enough, or will the mountain take more from us this year than we've stored away? The snow arrives in earnest by early November. At first it dusts the ground like flour scattered on a baking board. Then, by the second week, it blankets the valley. Roofs sag beneath it. Footpaths vanish. Trees wear white like mourning shrouds. The mountains, once sharp and grey, now rise like slumbering beasts beneath a sky that rarely brightens. You wake to stillness, the kind of silence that only deep winter can bring. Sound is muffled, footsteps absorbed into the snowpack, voices hushed by cold. Only the creak of wood, the groan of beams settling under ice, disturbs the quiet. This is the time when you live indoors more than out, when your world shrinks to the space between hearth and rafter, when food becomes not just fuel, but ritual. The meat hanging above the fire is almost ready now. It's been weeks since you pulled the salted cuts from the brine and strung them up on iron hooks near the chimney. Every day since, the hearth smoke has curled around them, slow, low, constant. It isn't fire you want, it's the steady trickle of smoke, enough to dry and preserve without cooking. This is the ancient method, cold smoking. No thermometer tells you when it's right. You rely on colour, on smell, on sound. The meat darkens over time, deep red and brown. It becomes firm to the touch. A good cut thuds like dry wood when you knock on it. You test by slicing a thin strip, chewing it slowly, letting your tongue decide. Too soft? More smoke. Too brittle? It's already gone too far. You use beechwood mostly, sometimes alder. The fia scent lingers in everything. The beams, the blankets, even your hair. The goats notice it too. They stamp and shift restlessly below the house in the byre. Their body heat rises through the planks of the floor, warming your feet as you work. Without them, the house would freeze. But this is more than drying meat. It's preservation of survival itself. Once smoked, the cuts are wrapped in linen and stored in the loft or kept hanging. Some are destined for soup pots. Others will be scraped thin and stretched into a midwinter feast. Shaved meat with boiled cabbage and bread crusts. The cheese requires equal care. Every few days, you climb the ladder to the rafter shelf and turn each wheel. Mould gathers along, the surface, grey, sometimes blue, but it's harmless, even welcome. The rind thickens, the smell intensifies. You brush it with salt water and feel the change under your fingers. It is no longer milk, it is time made edible. Sauerkraut, fermenting in its barrel, bubbles gently in the corner of the room. You check it too, lifting the wooden weight and skimming off any white film. The cabbage beneath is sharp and acidic, alive with the yeast and bacteria that make it last. It will keep through March if the temperature remains cold enough, if no one lifts the lid too often. Water, of course, is no longer drawn from the stream. It's buried now. Instead, snow is brought in and melted slowly on the hearth. You gather it in buckets, sometimes with your hands, your sleeves stiff with ice. You don't mind. It's clean and it's free. Other chores keep the family busy. Flax is combed. Wool is spun. Tools are sharpened by firelight. The days pass without much distinction. Church is still attended, though the priest often preaches alone. His breath clouds in the stone chapel, and the candles flicker in draughts. That never stop. There are no festivals, not now. Christmas, when it comes, is marked with prayer and perhaps a sweet made from honey and chestnut flour. Nothing more. The joy is in endurance, not in excess. You sometimes think about the people in the valleys below, the ones who can buy their salt and their bread instead of trading herbs and beans. They speak of warm winters and olive trees. It sounds like fiction. Here in the mountains the olive cannot grow, but neither can rot not easily. Cold is your greatest ally. And yet, despite your planning, you notice the cheese shelf is lower than it should be. One wheel cracked early. Another had to be traded to a neighboring family for firewood. You do the math again. How many heads of cabbage are left? How many days of snow remain? You tighten your belt. You make the pottage stretch further. You begin saving even the cooking water. It's not panic yet, but it's close. You remind yourself, this is why you salted in October. This is why you spent summer gathering herbs, drying berries, scraping every last bit of marrow from the bones. Winter demands reverence. And if you forget, it reminds you. Sometimes in the evening, you sit by the fire with your family and share a single strip of smoked meat passed from hand to hand. You chew slowly, not just to savor it, but to delay the moment it's gone. You talk of summer meadows, of goats grazing above the tree line, of wildflowers and bees. These are not stories. They are promises. And when your youngest child asks, will there be enough until the thaw? You don't answer directly. You look up at the rafters, where the meat hangs still, and you think, if spring comes early, perhaps. If not, will salt and snow be enough to carry us to the sun again? By late February, the world narrows. The windows are small, built to keep heat in, not let light out. And the glass, if your family is lucky enough to have it, is clouded by frost. Outside, the snow has hardened into thick layers. It no longer falls soft and fresh. Instead, it forms crusts that crack underfoot and walls that line every path. The sun hangs low, giving little warmth, casting long blue shadows across the village, roofs. Inside your home, the routine is pared to its essence. You wake, stoke the hearth, melt snow, prepare the first bowl of pottage. It tastes of barley, of roots, of endurance. Every movement is deliberate, every choice calculated. Food stores are now critically low. The cheese shelf is half empty. The smoked meat rack above the hearth is thinner. Only 3 sausages remain, each one counted more times than you care to admit. The root cellar offers little comfort. Soft carrots, spongy turnips, sprouting onions. A few are tossed to the goats, who are beginning to look as lean as you feel. You stretch meals with cabbage water, thickened by scraps of bread crust and dried nettle. The salt barrel is down to a crusted rim. It still preserves, but barely. You start reusing the brine, boiling it down and filtering it through linen to extract what you can. And yet, there is no hunger riot. No panic, just the slow ache of living inside winter's long silence. You are not alone. Other families are rationing too. One has traded their last wheel of cheese for firewood. Another lost 2 hens to a weasel in the coop. Everyone is tightening belts, chewing slower, talking less. The priest has begun holding services twice a week instead of once, not to offer answers, but to give structure. The words are always the same. Still, they offer shape in a time that feels shapeless. The snow begins to soften by March. Not melt, not yet, but it loses its sharpness. Footsteps sink deeper. The ice on the stream darkens, growing wet at the edges. Birds appear, just 1 or 2. A song from somewhere in the trees. The mountains, though still white and jagged, seem to exhale. You know the thaw is coming. You just don't know when, and the waiting is a test of its own. Every year there's a danger, a gap between what's left in the cellar and the first greens of spring. If the thaw comes too late, if an April storm delays the first foraging, if mold spreads in the smoked meat, or a rat finds the grain bin, there's no backup, no store, no savior. So you prepare. You scrape the walls of the cheesecloth for crumbs. You boil bones twice, sometimes 3 times. You walk carefully in the snow, knowing a twisted ankle now could mean weeks of immobility, weeks that require labor, not rest. Still, there are small mercies. A thawed patch of earth beneath the eaves reveals green shoots. Sorrel, maybe, or chickweed, edible, barely, but fresh. You gather it with reverence and mix it into broth. That evening's meal tastes different, not rich, not hearty, just different. A note of green amid the grey, and in that there is hope. Your neighbours report the same. A child finds mushrooms under a fir tree. A man traps a marmot. A woman uncovers the first wild garlic of the year. These aren't meals. They are signs. The smoke from your hearth is thinner now, less meat above it, less firewood below. But the air that drifts in through the window cracks no longer bites. It brushes. The wind smells of meltwater, of pine, of distance. One morning in late March, you wake to dripping. Not thunder, not music. Just water, falling steadily from the eaves. The roof is finally shedding its load. The snow on the path collapses in soft piles. And in the pasture, brown grass appears beneath the melting crust. The thaw has arrived. There is still hunger ahead. There is still rationing to be done, but you will make it now. You know it in your bones, and your bones have become good at knowing. The weeks that follow, you will gather sorrel and dandelion, wild onions and herbs. You'll open the barrel of sauerkraut, sour but safe. You'll boil your last sausage with spring greens and call it a feast. And soon, the goats will give milk. Again, the chickens will lay. The rhythm of life will resume, if not rejoice. But for now, you sit at the threshold of the season, hands wrapped around a warm mug of broth, and think of everything the snow demanded of you, every piece you gave, and every piece you managed to keep. You survived, and as the last icicle falls from the eaves, you ask yourself, when next winter comes, and it always does, what will you do differently? Or will you trust that salt, sweat, and snow will be enough again? It began, as such things often do, with a summer that never quite felt like summer. In the year 1621, in a village tucked along the edges of the Black Forest in southern Germany, the peasants noticed that the days were wrong. The sun rose late, when it rose at all. The rains came early, stayed too long, and ruined much of the barley before it ripened. The wheat heads never filled out properly. The orchards were quiet. Even the bees seemed sluggish. You would have thought it a passing season. But the old ones in the village muttered of something deeper, something more persistent. They remembered stories their parents told, of famines in the 1570s, of rivers that froze too early and didn't thaw till Easter, of entire villages blanketed not just in snow, but in silence. This, they said, was no ordinary winter approaching. This was the Kleine Eiszeit, the Little Ice Age, a long, uneven, creeping cold that would hang over Europe like a cloud for more than 2 centuries. And in your village, in 1621, you were living through one of its sharpest points. You are a peasant, of course. Nearly everyone is. Your world is measured in fields, not borders. You do not think of Germany. You think of the Count's land, the church tithe, the slope of the hill where the frost comes early. You share a home with 6 others, maybe more. Your walls are timber and clay, your thatch patched with moss. There is no glass in the windows, only oiled parchment, no chimney, just a smoke hole in the roof. You were already used to cold. But not like this. By late October, frost has destroyed most of what's left in the gardens. The cabbage heads froze and cracked open like overripe fruit. The turnips went soft underground. The beans, never fully dried, mildewed in their sacks. Even the firewood, stacked in careful piles all summer, burns badly. It's wet, green, smoky. The river that runs near the village bridge froze a full month earlier than last year. Geese fled sooner, and those that stayed behind died on the pond, their feathers rimmed in ice. You have 2 pigs, both smaller than they should be. One is already butchered. The other might have to wait till Candlemas or beyond. There's little lard to be rendered. Less fat means less insulation. And with this kind of cold, fat matters more than flavour. The Lord Steward still comes for taxes. He takes his grain, his firewood. Even as hunger creeps into your house like smoke under a door, obligation does not lessen. The fire, once a luxury, is now your axis. It burns day and night, fed with damp branches, peat, or, when nothing else is available, dried animal dung. You cook over it, yes, but more than that, you live around it. You sleep as close as you dare. You dry your rags there. You pass the long hours beside it, whispering or sitting in silence. It is not just heat, it is identity. A peasant's fire was not just warmth, it was hope. You remember hearing that in the cities there are grand hearths in every inn, that in castles fires are stoked in each room by servants. You imagine it sometimes, not just one fire, but many. The idea seems decadent, surreal. For you, there is one hearth, one stack of firewood, and no guarantees. Your children have stopped asking for bread. There isn't any. What little flour you had was mixed with acorn meal and dried nettle. It makes a kind of cake if boiled long enough, but it sours quickly. You've taken to boiling bark strips, shaving off the inner layer. Some say it helps, others say it's poison. You try anyway. You're not starving, not yet, but you see it around you, in the hunched backs, in the hollow eyes, in the absence of sound. Even the church bells seem reluctant these days. Your village priest has begun adding special prayers for warmth, for weather, for mercy. He wears 3 layers beneath his robes and speaks with a cracked voice. The church is cold stone. The altar candles gutter in the wind. No one kneels anymore. The floor is too cold. Rumours drift into the village from the north. Stories of entire villages fleeing south, of wolves seen near Leipzig, of people burning furniture in city streets, of harvests worse than yours, of nobles hoarding grain, of millers charging triple. But none of this helps you. Not really. Knowing others suffer doesn't make your potatoes less shriveled. You think about the past often. What did people do before? Before tools, before shelter, before even fire? And then you look at your own fire, the only thing separating your family from the cold that waits just beyond the threshold, and you ask yourself, what happens when even this flame is no longer enough to hold the dark at bay? By January, the cold no longer feels like weather. It feels like time itself has frozen. Your days blur together in shades of grey. Each morning you wake to the same dull light, the same frost-dusted beams overhead, the same aching emptiness in your stomach. There is no sunrise, not in the way you once knew it. Only a gradual lightening of the clouds that hangs for a few hours before darkness returns. This is not a single bad winter. It's the second in a row, and everyone says the last was better than the one before. The Little Ice Age, as future scholars would call it, is not an ice age in the grand geological sense. But for you, for the villagers, the serfs, the children born too late to remember warm harvests, it may as well be. It reshapes your life completely. Your family now eats once a day, if that. The stew pot has become an object of superstition. It is filled and refilled, though what's inside barely changes. Boiled grain, sometimes oats, sometimes just water with nettles or bark flour stirred in for thickness. A bit of fat from the sausage gone at Christmas might still cling to the rim. You dare not ask for more. You all understand the rules of this new world, even the children. No one eats without sharing. No one wastes. No one speaks of being full. The cold has claimed more than food. It has stolen people. Your neighbour Anna, who had been coughing since Advent, passed quietly in her sleep last week. No priest came to bless her. There was no candle procession, no chant. Just 3 villagers, a rough pine box, and a spade that bent against the frozen ground. The burial had to be shallow. Some now speak of wolves roaming the nearby forest, others of bandits, former soldiers from one war or another, stealing grain stores from barns at night. You keep the animals in your house not just for warmth, but protection. The last hen clucks quietly under your bench. The goat sleeps by the hearth. Her breath clouds the air like yours. And yet, you do not feel completely alone. There is a quiet solidarity among the villagers now. When someone's roof collapses under snow, others help repair it. When a child goes missing in the woods, you all search together, lanterns swinging like stars against the black. Even the priest, thin and pale, still visits the sick and offers his last loaf to a widow. One morning, in an act of silent courage, your brother shares half a smoked eel, preserved since November, with a family who has nothing left. He does not expect thanks. He receives none. But you see a glint of warmth in their eyes, a flicker like the fire on your hearth, and that is enough. There is no longer talk of spring. Not yet. To name it now feels dangerous, like tempting something cruel and unseen. Instead, you focus on firewood. The stack behind the house is dwindling. You've taken to breaking old furniture, chairs that no longer have legs, shelves with warped boards. You've begun eyeing the fence, wondering how much longer you'll need it to keep anything out. There are no thieves here, only the cold. You are not the only one. The village square is filled with smoke, the sky above stained by the ash of need. It clings to your hair, your clothes, your thoughts, and yet the fire must never go out. Even when it's just embers, even when it's just dung and straw, carefully shaped into patties. The hearth is the last promise of survival. You tend it like a child. Blow softly at its edges. Feed it with twigs, with shavings, with the bark of trees that once gave shade. Your dreams, when they come, are of warmth, of green fields, of bread with real flour and a crust that cracks, of butter, thick and pale, spread across it. These are luxuries now beyond even imagining, but you do imagine them. Everyone does, because imagining is one of the few things you can still do for free. At night, the wind howls like a beast outside the shuttered windows. You pull the goatskin tighter around your shoulders, huddle closer to your family. The fire is low, barely alive, but you've left just enough wood for the morning. And as you stare into the glowing coals, your thoughts flickering like the ash, you wonder if winter has changed everything we know. What kind of spring, if it ever comes, will rise from the ruin left behind? April arrives, but it brings no green. The snow has melted in patches, revealing not tender shoots or crocus blossoms, but blackened mud and brittle twigs. The fields resemble wounds more than soil. In the distance, the orchard trees stand lifeless, their buds frozen in place like interrupted prayers. This is the cruelest season of all. Not winter, not yet spring, just hunger laid bare. You had hoped, like everyone else, that March would bring a thaw that the first wild greens might poke through, that the goats would fatten again, that the hens might lay, that the soil would open like a book waiting to be written in seed. But the frost returned after the thaw. Twice. 2 nights ago it snowed again, not heavily, but just enough to coat the ground in white despair. You watched it fall through the slits in the shutters, and for a moment you felt nothing at all. No rage, no sadness, just the deep, still knowing of endurance pushed to its final thread. There is barely anything left. The last bag of oats is gone. The bark bread is gone. The goat produces thin milk, barely enough to mix with water. You eat a soup of water, nettles, and the smallest pinch of dried turnip. It warms your hands for an hour. Then the cold returns. The fire has been kept alive, but only just. You've burned the last of your kindling. There are no more branches, no chairs left. The fence is gone, sacrificed one post at a time. Yesterday, you considered burning the handles of the tools. But if spring ever does return, you'll need them. You're not alone in this calculus. The village has become quieter, not because there is nothing to say, but because speaking takes energy. The priest no longer gives sermons. He simply opens the chapel each morning and waits, seated by the altar. A few people visit, some pray, others simply sit, silent, beside the single flickering candle. A rumor reaches the village. In a nearby town, food riots have broken out. The local grain store was seized. The steward's house burned. Soldiers from a distant garrison arrived and arrested 5 men. No one knows where they were taken. You listen to this story without comment. And then, finally, on a morning near the end of April, the thaw comes. Not a symbolic one. Not a warm breeze that fades, but a true one. The ground softens beneath your boots. The chickens peck and cluck with purpose. The goat eats with greed. You spot the first cluster of sorrel near the southern wall of the church. You bring it home, in your hands as if it were gold. The children eat green for the first time in months. It isn't filling, but it is different. And in a season where sameness has been a form of slow suffocation, different is everything. The soil is tilled, though the tools are worn and your strength is low. Seeds saved from last year are planted, with reverence. Some germinate, others are dead. You'll know soon enough. But for now, you water the ground with melted snow and hope. Neighbors begin trading again. Small things, dried herbs for eggs, a flint shard for a spool of twine. The old life, such as it was, returning not with joy, but with caution. The memory of winter still clings like smoke. You bury your hands in the soil each day, to work, to pray, to remind yourself that not everything is dead. And slowly, the fire becomes something else. Not survival, but comfort. You let it die at night now. You don't need it to burn constantly. The air inside the house warms with the longer days. The goat kids. The hens lay. A pot of broth simmers with actual root vegetables, not scraps. You've made it. But the cost is clear. 2 houses are abandoned. 3 graves are new and unmarked. 1 family has vanished entirely, no note, no trace. When spring finally arrives fully, real and green and fragrant, it feels strange, like a visitor who stayed away too long and expects to be welcomed without question. But you don't welcome it with feasts. You welcome it with work. And every night, as the fire dwindles now by choice, you think of the months spent beneath the ash, and you ask yourself, as you plant another seed, if even spring can be taken, what must we carry inside us so that we are never fully without it again? In most parts of the world, winter closes roads, but in Russia, winter opens them. It is the year 1785, and you are part of a long, groaning caravan of sledges snaking its way across the frozen rivers and forested stretches between Novgorod and Arkhangelsk. The wind is sharp as glass. The snow, packed hard beneath the runners, sings its own bitter song as iron runners scrape across it. And yet, this is the season of movement. Because the rivers, impassable by boat in summer due to treacherous currents and poor maintenance, have finally frozen into perfect highways. These are the Zimniki, the winter roads. They connect an empire stretched so wide and varied that even the Tsars have trouble remembering all its pieces. The goods are many. Furs bundled in rough canvas sacks, bound for St. Petersburg merchants and Muscovite nobles. Iron tools from Ural, forges. Blocks of salt, hard as stone. Wax, honey, hides. Some sleds carry mail, others timber, others fish frozen so solid they clang when dropped. Your sledge is pulled by a trio of shaggy, thick-necked horses with steam rising from their flanks. Their bells jingle not for decoration but safety. In the deep, cold and white landscape, sound travels poorly. A jingle means you're not alone, and that might save your life if a sled veers too fast around a bend. You travel not alone, but in a convoy. Safety in numbers. There are wolves, and worse, bandits, drunk with boredom and desperate from isolation, who stalk the routes just as the merchants do. Guns are rare, axes more common. Everyone carries one. Your hands, wrapped in fur mittens, are stiff around the reins. You haven't felt your toes in hours, but you know better than to complain. The driver beside you, an older man with a beard gone silver from frost, says this is a good winter. Dry snow, little wind. You nod, even as your teeth ache with cold. Stops are rare and rough. At designated zastavas, way stations, you find crude cabins with a central fire pit, sometimes manned by postal guards or landowners. Inside, you eat. Salted fish or rye bread and hot tea brewed black and bitter. Some chew frozen fatback like it's hard candy. The walls are lined with smoke and horsehair. Everyone smells the same. Smoke, sweat, cold. Sleep comes in shifts. Someone must always tend the horses. The animals are half the cargo, more valuable than most of what they haul. Outside, the frost carves crystals along the trees. The sky, when visible, is pale and flat, like a lid over the world. You've passed abandoned villages already, buried in snow, their shutters flapping in the wind. Winter doesn't just travel here. It settles in, taking what it wants. But the empire depends on these roads. For half the year, many regions are unreachable except by winter sledge. In the north, fish caught in January might be in Moscow by February, packed in straw and snow. Letters from the Tsar's court travel faster by frozen river than any summer cart could manage through mud. Even in the capital, people watch for winter deliveries. Baltic amber, Finnish pine, Arctic firs. The nobles may toast before great fires and wear silks imported from France, but their luxury rides on sled runners, pulled by horses across frost and pine. You've been doing this route for 3 years. You've seen sleds tip and vanish into snowbanks. You've buried a driver who froze upright in his seat, eyes still open, reins in hand. You've heard the howls of wolves from tree lines too close for comfort. And once, near a frozen lake, you saw an entire shipment of wax swallowed by cracking ice after a late spring thaw caught the caravan by surprise. Still, you return, because winter is the only season that makes this journey possible. You reach the next way station after 20 hours on the trail. You stagger down from the sledge and stamp your feet, though there's little blood left in them. You enter the cabin. It's hot with fire and human breath. You breathe through your sleeve. A merchant there is cursing the cold. He says the Baltic port froze earlier than expected. Another says there's a jam in the sled traffic north of Tver. Too many wagons, not enough room. Someone else mutters about the price of tallow doubling in Moscow. You sit on a bench near the fire and close your eyes. You think of the frozen roads you've yet to cross, of rivers turned into streets, of snowdrifts taller than men, of the horses still steaming outside, waiting for the next stretch of trail. And as the wind howls outside and the logs pop in the fire, you wonder, how long can a nation build its rhythm on roads that only exist when the world forgets how to move? Morning comes late in the Russian winter. The sun rises low, skimming the treetops without offering real warmth and casting long blue shadows across the Zimnik Trail. Your caravan of sledges, 15 teams strong, sets out again before full light touches the snow. There is no waiting for comfort on the frozen road. The horse's breath rises in steady plumes. Their hooves leave faint marks that will disappear with the next wind. Snow settles into your beard. Your hands, inside double-layered mittens, still sting. But movement helps. Motion is your heat, and you must keep moving. The route today leads across a frozen river, broad, smooth, and treacherous. The men walk beside the sledges, not on them, just in case. If the ice creaks too much, you space the loads wider, slow the pace, listen closely. The road is not marked, not in any permanent way. There are no signposts, no fences. What guides you are grooves, faint depressions in the snow, lines carved by sledges days or weeks before. If you lose those, you risk veering off the safe path, into thin ice or unploughed forest. You pass frozen villages that seem half abandoned. Smoke rises from only a few chimneys. Most doors are barred. Whole families stay inside for weeks. You do not stop unless the horses need water or a sledge needs repair. Sometimes a boy runs out, cheeks red, hands bare, to trade. A bundle of firewood for a sack of salt. A small bottle of lamp oil for dried apples. The drivers haggle briefly, then move on. No time for pleasantries. Every few hours, you stop to scrape the iron runners. Ice build-up slows the sled. The scraping sound, iron on snow, is one of the few sounds out here besides wind And still the caravan pushes forward. This is not a luxury trade. The sledges do carry furs and wax, yes, but also nails, rawhide, salt fish, axes, smoked meat. Items bound for smaller towns and villages that receive no shipments in summer. For them, the winter roads are the only supply chain. In Russia's vast decentralized landscape, distance itself becomes an adversary. And in winter, it turns paradoxically into a temporary advantage. Where summer brings mud and impassable rivers, winter hardens the world into something firm, reliable, if dangerous. You remember last year, how a group of sledges vanished between Vitagra and Kargopol. They took the inland route, supposedly faster, but were buried in a sudden storm. Days later, their trail was found. The tip of a sleigh, then a horse's frozen hoof, then a fur cap. But the route survived. Someone else came days after, saw, where the snow dipped unnaturally and marked a new path beside it. The Zimnik continues. The empire must move. At night, you rest in a roadside izba, a log shelter built by the state decades ago for the postal riders and long-distance traders. It is one room, always smoky, walls blackened with soot, the stove huge and central. You take off your outer coat, your boots steam. Someone passes a flask of samogon, harsh and clear. It burns down your throat and brings sensation back to your cheeks. An old driver, grey-bearded and missing 3 fingers, tells a story about moving imperial documents from Arkhangelsk to Moscow during the war with Sweden. He says he rode through snow so deep he had to stand on the sledge, whipping the horse from above the drifts. He laughs, but no one else does. Everyone knows that's not exaggeration. That's experience. You eat a slice of salted fish, wrapped in black bread, and share dried mushrooms with another driver. The food is not enough, but it is warm. You pull your coat tighter and lie on straw near the stove. The wind howls outside like a choir of wolves. The logs crack. The horses shift in their hitching lines. And somewhere far to the west, on another, Zimnik, another caravan moves in your direction. That's the thing about these roads. They're never truly empty. The cold keeps people apart, but the winter road draws them together, if only for a few weeks each year. You sleep in bursts, waking every hour to tend the fire or listen for trouble. You think of home, though it is hundreds of versts away. You think of spring, not with longing, but with calculation. Because when the thaw comes, the road will vanish. And as you drift again into a shallow sleep, you ask yourself, what happens to a land built on frozen paths when the ice melts before the message is delivered? By the first weeks of March, you begin to notice it, not with your eyes, but with your boots. The snow no longer crunches sharply underfoot. It gives, softens. Beneath your sledge, the iron runners begin to snag on slush where once they skimmed over ice like skates. The sound changes, from a hiss to a squelch. Every driver hears it. Every horse feels it. The Zimnik is beginning to die. Spring in Russia doesn't arrive gently. It crashes in, like a late messenger carrying urgent news. And the first thing it demands is the road. You knew this was coming. Everyone does. These roads are temporary. They do not endure. They are born from snow and vanish with the thaw, erased like chalk beneath rain. Now, as your caravan nears the end of its route, you push harder. The stops are shorter. The horses are exhausted, but still strong. You switch out leads more often, trade heavier loads to lighter sledges. You're racing not against time, but temperature. At this point, you are near the Volga, threading the corridor between towns built more on habit than planning. The river is still frozen, but the edges, glisten dark by noon, Pools form on the surface like mirrors waiting to crack. You cross early in the morning, before the sun begins its slow assault. Every hoofbeat on the ice echoes in your chest. The frozen road is now riddled with hazards. Sections that once felt smooth are pitted with half-melted ruts, their edges jagged and unpredictable. A sledge tips on a curve. It doesn't break, yet, but you feel the balance shift beneath you with every turn. You pass other convoys now, stalled or turning back. One group waves you down, asking if you've seen a missing wagon that left the Zastava a day earlier and hasn't been seen since. You haven't. You fear they won't be found before the melt swallows their tracks. And yet, despite the danger, the uncertainty, the looming thaw, your route is almost complete. You reach the final drop-off point in late evening. The station master, wrapped in a bear hide coat, counts the goods delivered and signs a weather-stained manifest. You are paid in coin, some in salt, some in a promissory note good at the Arkhangelsk docks. It's not wealth, but it's enough. Enough for tea. Enough for firewood. Enough for survival. The return journey will not happen this year. You'll remain in this town until summer, when the roads open again. Different ones. Mud roads, swamp roads, roads that break wheels and drown oxen. You'll work a dock maybe, or mend sledges until next winter, because you know this life is not only about motion, it's about pause. You sit by a fire that night in the yard behind a tavern, watching the road you just travelled begin to dissolve. No one will ride it tomorrow, and in a week it will be gone entirely. Just slush, and then soil, and then memory. That's the way with the Zimnik. It gives without asking, and then it disappears without apology. But in its brief life, it binds the empire. It carries letters, promises, salt, and silence. It moves peasants and nobles alike. It is what allows Russia, impossibly vast and deeply fragmented, to pretend, just for a season, that it is connected. You toss a bit of stale bread to a dog lying near the fire. It sniffs and eats. The horses sleep standing, steam rising from their flanks. The moonlight hits the rutted trail one last time before the clouds return, and as you pull your coat tighter, thinking of next year's first frost, you reflect. What kind of nation depends on a road that disappears? And what does that say about those who ride it, again and again, no matter the cost? In Iceland, winter is not just a season, it is a landscape. And for most of its history, the people who lived there met it not by fleeing it or braving it, but by burrowing into it. It is the year 1710. You are a tenant farmer's child, living just outside the shadow of Mount Hekla, the volcano the priests say is the mouth of hell. The wind outside screams like it's caught in a long, slow death. Snow, heavy and coarse, drifts sideways across the highlands. The sun, what little of it exists in December, flickers dimly behind a grey veil and then disappears entirely by mid-afternoon. Inside your home, however, is quiet, warm, still. That home is a Torfbär, a turf house. Built from thick walls of stacked earth and grass, it doesn't look like much from the outside. A low structure, often nearly swallowed by snowdrifts. Its roof sprouts moss in the summer, but in winter it becomes indistinguishable from the hillside itself. It blends into the land like a burrow, but inside, it is another world. The walls, reinforced with stone and driftwood, are covered in sheepskin or rough-woven cloth to keep the damp at bay. The floors are packed dirt or flagstone. Smoke curls from a low chimney, an innovation compared to the open vents of older homes, and the fire in the hearth is a constant, managed like a member of the family. Without it, there is no light, no heat, no food. The turf house is not a building, It is a cocoon. You share this space with your parents, siblings, perhaps an aunt or two. The animals, sheep and a cow maybe, are stabled in an adjacent bay. Their body heat helps warm the living space. There is no privacy, and yet, no one speaks of discomfort. There is only survival. Each day in December begins in darkness and ends in darkness. You live in a liminal state where time is measured less by sun and more by routine. Chores, meals, scripture reading, the scraping of ice from the inside of the walls, the repair of tools, the spinning of wool, the storytelling by firelight. Your father reads from a postilla, a book of Lutheran sermons, printed in Reykjavik and passed from family to family. Your mother spins coarse wool into yarn, the spindle, flicking back and forth like a metronome of winter life. Your older brother carves small tools from driftwood. You help salt the fish, turn the cheese, feed the animals. The food is simple: barley porridge, skyer, sour and thick, dried fish, boiled with butter if you have any. Sometimes a bit of mutton from the salted stores. The diet is high in protein and repetition. Vegetables are rare. Fresh anything is non-existent. There is no sugar, very little grain, no fruit unless dried berries from the autumn gathering were preserved properly. Coffee, if it appears at all, is a luxury so rare it's treated like a sacrament. The cold outside does not frighten you. It is a fact of life, like gravity or age. The snow piles high against the turf walls, helping insulate them further. Inside, the warmth is surprising, dense and earthy, as though you were living in the chest of the mountain itself. You sleep under layers of sheepskin and wool, pressed shoulder to shoulder with your siblings, breathing the same warm, recycled air. You hear the storm's voice outside, but it feels far away. The wind hammers the roof, testing its seams. But it does not enter. The turf holds. Your world is small, measured in meters, not miles. And yet, within that small space, life continues with surprising richness. There are stories passed down, of trolls and ghosts, of Huldufolk, the hidden people who live inside rocks and hills. You've never seen them, of course, but in winter, when the dark grows long and the mind wanders, you believe. There are also tales of the Moduhardindin, the famine years, when Hekla last erupted and the skies darkened for weeks. Crops failed, sheep died, people wandered into the lava fields, never to return. These stories are not meant to scare you. They are meant to instruct. The earth gives, but it also takes. You must listen to it, build with it, hide inside it when needed. The turf house embodies that wisdom. It is not proud, not tall, not beautiful in the way castles or cathedrals are, but it is perfect for this place, and it has kept your family alive through storms that would tear wooden cottages to splinters. In the evening, the fire burns low. The smell of smoke and sheep and sour milk lingers. Your father tells a story in a low voice. Your mother sings a psalm. You close your eyes and sleep, not in fear of the storm, but cradled by it. The earth is around you, above you, beneath you, and as the wind howls again, testing the walls of the turf house once more, you wonder, what happens to people who live half inside the land? When the land itself begins to shift, the days crawl by. Outside your turf house, the wind never stops. It rises and falls like a breath drawn across the wide, cold chest of the island. The darkness continues, broken only by the dim glow of whale oil lamps or the flicker of the fire you have nursed since autumn. Time inside the Torfbear is measured in routines, in how many times you've stirred the sour porridge, in how many wool skeins you've spun. It's late January now. And though the calendar says the light is returning, your eyes don't yet believe it. You've learned how to move within this house like water in a carved stone bowl. Quiet, circular, slow. The turf walls do not echo, but they do listen. You hear each word whispered in the next room, each creak of the wood, each breath of your brother as he turns in his sleep. The hearth remains the center. It provides both literal and spiritual heat. It's where food is cooked, socks are dried, arguments are softened, and stories passed down. It isn't large, but it burns constantly, even if only with peat and dried dung when driftwood runs out. Iceland has no forests, not anymore. The Vikings cut those down long ago. Now, you burn what the sea throws back or what the sheep and horses leave behind. And still, the house holds. The walls are not just turf. They are generations, each layer of sod placed by hand, each beam set into place with care. Your great-grandfather laid the floor stones. Your mother patched the moss. You repaired the smoke vent last autumn when the first snow came early. Every winter you inhabit this house not like a tenant, but like a limb returning to a body. It is not shelter from the earth. It is the earth. You remember what the priest said last time he visited, how the turf house is like a church in reverse, a place built downward, low and humble, not to reach heaven, but to stay alive here. Not everyone shares this reverence. Some in Reykjavik are building timber houses now, imported boards from Denmark, painted white, with glass windows and high walls. They say it is modern, civilized, that Iceland must become more like Europe. But they don't live here beneath the mountains. They don't know what happens when the wind finds a loose board and peels it away like bark. Still, change is coming. You've seen the steam rising from the ground in the valley. Geothermal wells, they say. In the next generation, people may heat their homes from the deep places of the earth, not just burn the surface. Will they still build with turf? Will they remember how? You look around your home. The low ceiling, the lamp-blackened beams, the shelves of hard bread and dried fish, the animal stalls at the back where the cow shifts in its straw. This is not comfort, but it is continuity, and still, winter tests you. 2 weeks ago, the cow stopped giving milk. Your father says it's from poor fodder, but your mother worries it's something worse. Your sister's cough is deeper now. She wraps herself tighter in her woolen shawl, even while sitting next to the fire. The larder is thinning, barley gone, butter low, dried fish growing brittle. And so you begin to stretch things. You cut the flatbread thinner. You boil the bones again. You mix sawdust into the dung bricks to make them burn longer. Not because you are starving, but because you remember how quickly not enough becomes nothing. The house groans some nights. The turf settles. The stones shift. You hear it in your bones. And yet you stay inside, warm, aware that the walls are aging, as all things do. Turf must be replaced. Peat must be dug. No building lasts forever. Still, few last as long as these. Sometimes, as you sit spinning in the firelight, you hear the storm beat on the turf and imagine it like a sea trying to wash you away, but it cannot. Because you are not in the house, you are part of it. The house is not a barrier between you and nature. It is your body's skin, stretched further, shaped into shelter. You breathe its warmth. You dream its age. And as you lie, down to sleep, your ear pressed to the sheepskin pillow, the sound of the wind filtered through the turf roof, you wonder, what happens to a people who survive by becoming the land, if the land begins to forget them in return? It is now early March, and though the sun still hesitates to rise, it climbs a little higher each day. The darkness hasn't broken, but it bends. Outside your turf house, the snow is thinning on the south-facing slopes, and water trickles for the first time in months, thin, cold, persistent. Inside, the house remains as it was, warm, dark, close, but the rhythm is changing. You spend more time near the smoke vent now, adjusting it not for warmth, but for air. The animals in the stall are restless. The cow has started to give milk again, thin and watery at first, but real. The sheep are heavy with wool and waiting for the thaw. Even the chickens, their feathers dusted in soot, have laid 2 small eggs, a miracle in winter. Your mother weeps when she cracks the first one into the pan. There is still little food, but there is promise. Now, a net cast into the nearby fjord brought in 3 fish. Not salted, not dried, but fresh. The taste of real sea on your tongue reminds you what the seasons used to mean. You've begun to open the outer door more often, sweeping the entrance, free of snow, letting the light in, if only briefly. The children squint, unaccustomed to brightness. They blink, like animals stepping from a cave. The turf walls have held. Through another winter of ice, wind, sickness and hunger, the Torfbear remained just as it has for centuries. It cracked in places. A few stones shifted, but it endured. Not because it is strong in the way stone is strong, but because it flexes. It absorbs the world rather than fights it. These houses were not designed. They were remembered, passed from one generation to the next, not in blueprints, but in hands and tools and habit. This beam must angle inward. That turf must be layered in alternating stripes. Straw in the roof, moss in the seams, wood on the floor if you can afford it, dung if you can't. No one calls them beautiful, but you do. You know every inch of this house, where the wind hums through the western wall, where the warmth pools near the hearth, where the ice melts last. You could walk it in pitch black, and often do. Your father says a new kind of house is coming, with boards and nails and coal stoves and Danish windows. But you wonder, can they hold the silence like these walls can? Will the wind respect them? Someday, the house will fall. All turf houses do. Grass reclaims, earth collapses, stones sink. They are not built to last forever, but neither are you. And yet, while you are here, while the fire still burns, while the snow still stacks itself gently, across the roof, you live. Your hands are cracked, your eyes red, but you are alive. And when the first real thaw arrives, and you open the heavy outer door and feel the wind not as threat, but as breath, you step out slowly, blinking, thin, but whole. The mountain still looms. The fjord still groans. But the grass is coming. Later that night, you sit near the fire and touch the turf wall gently with your palm. It is still cool, still damp, still breathing. Like you, and you ask yourself, when we no longer live in houses made of the land, will we still understand what it means to survive by becoming part of it? It is the year 1317 in the countryside of Aquitaine, and winter has arrived not like a guest but like a siege. The wind is damp, the skies are slate-coloured, and the frost settles into everything, into the thatch, into the wood grain, into your bones. You are a serf, tied to a narrow strip of land just beyond the reach of the Lord's manor in a hamlet, too small to name on any map. The harvest was bad. Again. And now the days are short, the nights long, and the food, never abundant, is nearly gone. Your family moves slowly, wrapped in layers of old wool and linen, heads always bowed, not in humility, in conservation. To look up is to meet the wind. To walk quickly is to use more strength than you can afford. In these months, even movement is rationed. By midwinter, survival becomes a form of retreat. The villagers call it la morte saison, the dead season. It is here, in this frozen pause, that a strange and largely forgotten practice begins to take shape. It is not officially named, not written down in records, but it exists in whispers, in habits, in the way families sleep through the long months, the long sleep. You begin to notice it around Christmas, after the last of the preserved onions have softened and the final wheel of rye bread has gone hard and dark. People begin to sleep more, not out of laziness, but necessity. There is no fuel to keep the fire burning night and day. The little warmth you have must be saved for boiling water, baking the occasional flat cake of grain and bran, heating stones to place in the bed to stave off frostbite. So in the absence of warmth, you sleep. For 12, sometimes 16 hours a day, families huddle together under shared bedding. Straw mattresses, animal skins, cloaks. Children press into parents. Elders sleep close to the wall where the stones hold heat. It's not a deep sleep, not always, but it is long. There are dreams, but mostly there is waiting. You do not call it hibernation. You do not know the word, but your body understands. When food is scarce and the days are dim, your heart beats slower, your limbs feel heavy. The instinct is not to fight the cold, but to match it, to settle, to still. And so the village slows with you. Work is minimal. No ploughing, no sowing. The animals are kept alive with hay and roots, but their milk dries up. There are no eggs. The hens don't even cluck. They conserve energy too. The oxen, once your pride, stand dull-eyed in the barn, their breath steaming in the dark. The priest does not hold mass daily now. Once a week, maybe. The church is too cold. Candles are too dear. His homilies, when given, are short and bitter. He speaks of suffering and sin, though no one has the energy for guilt, only hunger. There are no records of this sleep, no scrolls or sermons, but everyone knows it. You feel it in your marrow. You see it in the soot-darkened beams, where your mother rests longer than usual, where your brother no longer rises at dawn to break the ice in the well. The bucket stays frozen. The well can wait. Meals shrink to one per day. A thin gruel of millet or barley, stretched with water and a spoonful of sour wine to give it weight. Salted beans if you're lucky. Boiled acorns if not. Sometimes nothing. And, when the stomach grumbles, when the head spins from emptiness, you lie back down. You pull the blanket higher. You close your eyes. Because sleep is the one hunger you can still satisfy. This rhythm is passed through generations, not as advice, but as instinct. You do not announce it. We will sleep more. You simply do. It is not a decision. It is surrender and survival, the closest thing to safety left. And still, you feel time's slow hand. The frost creeps into the walls. The thatch drips where snow melts through the roof's patchwork. The bread mold spreads quickly now. Nothing grows, not even hope. But when you lie down again, under 3 layers of wool, between your sister and the family dog, you feel something strange. Not despair, but suspension. A sense that, for now, the world has paused, and that you are waiting with it. Outside, the moon glows pale on the snow. Inside, your father's breathing deepens. The fire is almost gone. You listen to the crackle fade, and you wonder if winter teaches us to sleep through our hunger. What will we awaken to when the thaw finally comes? By February, the hunger is a companion. It follows you everywhere, like a shadow, but heavier. You feel it behind your ribs, in your teeth, in your thoughts. It is no longer a pang or a complaint. It is something else now, something settled. It dulls everything except the cold. You do not cry from it. You do not complain. No one does. There is no energy for complaints, only the sound of wind against shutters and the occasional snap of frozen thatch breaking under its own weight. The long sleep deepens. In your home and in every home in your hamlet, people stay in bed all day if they can. There is no fire unless there is cooking, and there is no cooking unless something is found or traded. To wake means facing cold, facing hunger. So people dream instead, or not quite dream. Drift. It is a strange state, neither fully asleep nor awake. You lose hours this way, sometimes entire days. The body turns inwards. Limbs grow cold, yes, but they do not shiver. The mind turns silent. Even thoughts become slower. You find yourself watching the beams above the bed for hours, not thinking of anything. Just waiting. Children ask fewer questions. The youngest have stopped asking for bread entirely. They know there is none. There is little firewood left. What remains is damp or twisted. Bark burns quickly, spits. You try peat, but it stinks. You tried burning straw once. It vanished in seconds. One family burned their ladder. Another traded their last pot for 2 dried beets. And still, no one leaves. In better years, the poor might beg at the monastery gates, might walk the road to the next town, might barter salted eggs or spun wool. But not this winter. The roads are buried. The woods are too still. The monks are starving too. And so the village simply exists. Each house is a dim chamber of breath and cloth. You sleep under layers of rags and wool. Every few days, someone rises to check the stores. You've taken to boiling bones again, scraping them with a nail for any soft matter. You bake bread from chestnut flour mixed with crushed grape seeds. You stretch the dregs of last year's wine into broth. The priest visits on Sundays, but he does not preach anymore. He blesses the rooms quickly and moves on. He is thinner now, wrapped in patched robes, his cross clinking against his ribs when he leans down to light a candle. His words have softened. Less about damnation, more about endurance. Even his Latin has grown simpler. You hear things sometimes from passing peddlers or desperate travellers, that in the north, entire villages have emptied, that people have fled to the woods, hoping to live on bark and roots. That spring is late, this year. That famine is worse in Burgundy. That Paris is full of beggars, but no one knows what is true. News is just another hunger now, something that comes without nourishment, and yet somehow people survive. The old woman next door still knits. The young man with the burned hand still sings under his breath while scraping the last of the salted fish from a pot. Your father sharpens a wooden spoon, though no one knows why. You dream more now, not of castles or feasts or angels, but of bread, of real crust, of warm milk, of onions sizzling in fat. You dream of green grass, of walking barefoot, of light that stays longer than a breath. You wake up disappointed, but not broken. The long sleep is not rest. It is a negotiation. Your body trades motion for time. It borrows warmth from the people beside you. It slows the rhythm of living so You might survive until life resumes, and now, in the second week of Lent, you rise before dawn and press your hand to the door. The wood is cold, but not frozen. You listen. There is dripping, real, slow dripping from the thatch above. You hold your breath. Could it be? And you wonder, if the body can forget how to hunger, can it also remember how to hope? It is now late, March, and the world is waking with you. The ice along the stream has broken. The path between the fields is no longer white, but brown and slick with meltwater. The trees remain bare, but the wind has lost its bite. It brushes your face like a wet cloth rather than a blade. And for the first time in months, the birds sing. Not loudly, not in chorus. Just a few tentative notes, enough to break the silence. You step outside for longer now. Only for minutes at a time, but even that feels daring. Your legs are unsteady. The air feels unfamiliar. The sun, when it appears through low clouds, makes your eyes water. You squint, like someone waking too fast. Inside, the long sleep is ending. You rise earlier now, not because you're rested, but because you must. The last of the salted beans is gone. The bread stores are empty. The sour wine has turned to vinegar. Your mother now mixes nettles into everything, even the broth. You chew slowly, more from caution than fullness. But even hunger feels different now. Less of a weight, more of a memory. The urgency is returning to your limbs. There is work to do. Even before the thaw is complete, the fields must be cleared, the tools sharpened, the thatch patched. The cow coaxed to milk. The hen's roost checked. The planting season waits for no one, even those who nearly slept through death. Your brother walks with a limp now, the result of weeks spent too still. Your sister has lost her voice to a winter cough. Your father says little, but when he sees the snow shrinking from the orchard wall, he closes his eyes and breathes deeply. Once. And still, not everyone has woken. The widow in the hut by the old well never emerged. Her door remained shut through Candlemas, through Lent and now. When someone finally opened it, they found only quiet and peace, a sleep too deep to rise from. Others are missing. A child, a blind man, a family who said they would leave in January if things worsened. No one knows if they reached the next town or were swallowed by the woods. But most of you remain. Diminished, yes, but present. The priest, gaunt as a broom handle, opens the chapel again. He rings the bell, weakly, but it rings. People gather, fewer than before, but together. He speaks not of punishment now, but of trial, of Noah's long wait, of Christ's 40 days, of Lazarus waking not by will, but by grace. He speaks of the end of sleep. And now the tasks resume. The fields are dry enough to work by late April. You press seeds into the ground with fingers that still ache. You know some will not grow, but enough will. You plant not with confidence, but with need. You pray with your hands, not your mouth. Your body aches each night in ways the long sleep never brought, but you welcome it. You feel alive, heavy, yes, hungry still, but moving again. And, slowly, food returns. Nettle broth with onion tops, sorrel, the first egg. You share everything. Nothing is stored. Not yet. The land must give again before you dare to ask for surplus. But you begin to dream new dreams now. Not of sleep, but of motion, of light lasting longer, of baskets full, not empty, of harvests that will come not from the Lord's generosity, but from your own patient labour. And as the first true warmth spreads through the soil and into your bare feet, you think back to the months when you did not move, did not hope, did not hunger, just endured. You survived not by strength, but by stillness. And now you ask yourself, what does it mean to be truly awake? When you have spent the coldest season of your life learning to disappear,